It's 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and you're sitting on the edge of your bed with your phone in your hand. You just opened your banking app. You didn't mean to. It's just muscle memory at this point, the same way some people check the weather. And the number you're looking at is the same number that was there yesterday, which is somehow lower than it was last Thursday. And you're trying to do the math in your head about rent, and your car insurance renewal, and the dentist thing you've been putting off, and that wedding in April you already said yes to before you looked at your calendar. Your chest does that thing, that little squeeze. You lock the phone, you put it face down on the nightstand. You tell yourself you'll figure it out tomorrow. But here's the part nobody talks about. You did figure it out yesterday, and the day before. And somehow it's getting harder, not easier. And you can't tell if that's you or if something else is going on. This is Rocket Finance, and this video is about why that midnight feeling isn't just in your head and why almost half of an entire generation is feeling it right now at the exact same time. We're going to walk through what actually changed in the last 12 months, what the real numbers look like, and why the story you've been told about hard work and financial security has gotten pretty hard to believe. If you've been wondering whether it's just you, it isn't. Stick around, and if this is the kind of thing you want more of, go ahead and hit subscribe. It genuinely helps. Okay, so let's start with the number that made me want to make this video in the first place. Deloitte runs this massive global survey every year, more than 23,000 workers across 44 countries, Gen Z and millennials. And in the most recent round, they asked people whether they felt financially insecure. And between 2024 and 2025, the share of Gen Z workers answering yes jumped from 30% to 48% in 1 year. That is not a drift. That is not a trend line bending a little. That is a 60% increase in a single 12-month window. Almost half of an entire generation went from "I think I'm okay" to "I don't think I'm okay" in the time it takes to renew a driver's license. And it's not just Gen Z. Millennials went from 32% to 46% in the same window. That's a 44% jump. These are the two generations that, according to Deloitte's own projections, are going to make up 74% of the global workforce by 2030. So, we're talking about 3 out of every 4 workers on the planet walking into their peak earning years with a level of financial anxiety we haven't really seen measured at this scale before. And if that feels personal to you, it's because the math is now personal for almost everyone your age. Here's what financially insecure actually means in practice. Because that phrase is kind of the polite version of "we're not really sure how to pay for things." 56% of Gen Z say they live paycheck to paycheck. 55% of millennials say the same. More than 30% of both groups say they don't think they'll ever retire comfortably. Most say they couldn't cover an unexpected expense. A car repair, a medical bill, a broken laptop in a job that requires a laptop. These are not people planning their Roth IRA contributions. These are people hoping the check engine light holds off until next payday. So the obvious question is, what the hell happened? How do you go from 30% to 48% in a year? Generations don't usually shift like that. People's actual personalities don't change that fast. So something external had to change. And when you look at the data, it's not one thing. It's about 5 things all happening at once. The first is the wage and inflation problem, which you've probably felt even if you've never looked at the numbers. The Indeed Wage Tracker shows that advertised wages in job postings grew about 2.5% year over year heading into late 2025. Inflation ran hotter than that. So in real terms, even people who got what looked like a raise got a pay cut. And people who changed jobs hoping the market would reward them, a lot of them ran the math afterward and realized they'd broken even at best. That used to be the reliable move. Job hop every 2 years, get a 15% bump. That playbook stopped working. The second thing is the job market itself. Economists have started calling this a low-hire, low-fire economy. Companies aren't doing mass layoffs, which is why the unemployment rate looks okay on paper. but they are also not hiring. So if you already have a job, you feel stuck. And if you don't have one, or you're trying to level up, you feel frozen out. Entry-level job postings have dropped 29% since January 2024. Junior tech roles specifically down 35%. Logistics entry-level positions down 25%. Finance entry-level down 24%. So if you're 23 and you've been applying to 80 jobs and hearing nothing back, that's not your resume. That's the market shrinking underneath you. The third piece is student debt. A huge chunk of Gen Z walked into adulthood with loan balances that were structured around a very specific promise. The promise was, you take on this debt, you get a degree. The degree gets you a job. The job pays enough to cover the debt and also build a life. That bargain has not really held up. Payments resumed, costs kept climbing. And the job that was supposed to make it all work either pays less than expected or doesn't exist in the numbers it used to. Fourth is housing. I don't need to convince you about housing. You already know. Rent is eating a bigger share of your paycheck than it ate of your parents' paycheck at the same age. In a lot of cities, that share has crossed 40%, which is the number at which financial advisors start using the word cost-burdened, which is again the polite version of you're in trouble. And the fifth thing, which I think gets talked about less, is that the cost of normal life has climbed in ways that don't show up in headline inflation numbers. Car insurance, health insurance deductibles, the fees on literally everything. You go to sign up for something, and there's a convenience fee, a processing fee, a service fee. The sticker price is almost never the real price anymore. Put those 5 things in a blender, and you get that 30 to 48% jump. You get the midnight banking app check. You get the feeling that you're running harder than the people who came before you, and somehow ending up further behind. And here's where it gets darker, because financial stress doesn't stay in your checking account. Deloitte found that 40% of Gen Z workers feel stressed or anxious all or most of the time. All or most of the time. That's not a bad week. That's a default state. A separate Seramount study found that 77% of millennials and 72% of Gen Z report at least one symptom of burnout. And when people in that group were asked what's driving the stress, financial concerns came in as the #1 contributor. Not workload, not bosses, money. And the life satisfaction numbers tell you what this actually feels like from the inside. Among financially secure Gen Z workers, 60% say they're satisfied with their lives. Among financially insecure Gen Z workers, that drops to 28%, less than half. The same pattern shows up for millennials. 68% satisfaction if you're secure, 31% if you're not. So, we're not talking about a mood, we're talking about a fundamentally different experience of being alive, depending on whether your bank account has a cushion or not. And this feeds back into work, which feeds back into money, which feeds back into stress. 68% of Gen Z workers say their mental health has affected their ability to work effectively, which makes sense. It's really hard to write the deck or close the ticket or nail the interview when part of your brain is running a background process on whether you can afford groceries on Sunday. But then your performance at work is the thing that's supposed to earn you the raise that fixes the money problem. So you're stuck in a loop where the stress is the thing preventing you from fixing the cause of the stress. That's not a you problem, that's a structural failure. And look, I want to pause here because this is where a lot of finance content goes off the rails. This is the part where the usual voice would pivot and tell you to cut your spending, track every dollar, wake up at 5 a.m., start a side hustle, develop a millionaire mindset. I'm not going to do that, because none of that changes the fact that wage growth is trailing inflation and entry-level postings are down 29%. You cannot budget your way out of a structural issue. What you can do is get clear on what's actually in your control and stop burning energy on the parts that aren't. So, here's what's actually changed about how your generation thinks about work. And I think this is one of the more interesting findings in the Deloitte data. Only 6% of Gen Z say their primary career goal is reaching a leadership position. 6%. When you ask the same generation what they do want, 26% say financial independence. Almost 30% of millennials say the same. And work-life balance is right there with it. This gets framed in a lot of boomer-coded op-eds as Gen Z being lazy or unambitious. That's not what's happening. What's happening is Gen Z watched an entire generation above them take promotions, move into management, work 60 hours a week, and still end up financially insecure. 46% of millennials feel financially insecure. These are the people who did the thing. They climbed the ladder. And the ladder didn't deliver. So the next generation looked at that and said, why would I sign up for the stress of a leadership role if the financial payoff isn't real? That's not laziness, that's pattern recognition. And it ties into something Deloitte calls the trifecta: money, meaning, and well-being. 89% of Gen Z and 92% of millennials still say purpose matters to them in a job. They haven't given up on meaning. They just refuse to trade financial stability for it or their mental health for it. They want all three. And if a job only offers one, they leave. The average Gen Z tenure in a job right now is 1.1 years, according to Randstad. 1.1. For millennials, it's 1.8. For Gen X, it was 2.8. And older generations call this job hopping. Younger workers call it survival, because in an environment where your internal raise is 2.5% and a new job might come with a 10% bump, loyalty is a luxury you can't afford. Okay, so let's come back to that bedroom. 11:47 p.m., phone face down on the nightstand. What actually helps? I want to be honest with you. None of what I'm about to say is going to unbreak the system. This is not the part of the video where everything gets fixed. But there are a handful of moves that compound quietly, and they matter more in a broken environment than they would in a healthy one. The first is boring. Build a small emergency fund, not 6 months. Start with $1,000. That's it. Because the second thing $1,000 does, after covering a flat tire, is it changes what you can say yes and no to. When you have $0 of cushion, you cannot walk away from a toxic boss. You cannot turn down a bad offer. You cannot negotiate hard, because if they say no, you lose. $1,000 buys you the ability to say, actually, I'm gonna keep looking. And that option is worth way more than $1,000. The second is free money. If your employer offers a 401k match and you're not taking it, you're leaving part of your compensation on the table every single paycheck. The match is the one part of your total comp that isn't really contested, is just sitting there. HSAs, commuter benefits, tuition reimbursement, employee stock purchase plans, those are all in the same category. Money that's technically yours, but only if you claim it. The third is negotiation. Research from Bankrate, Pew, and a stack of other places keeps showing the same thing. Younger workers and women, in particular, accept initial offers without negotiating. A 5% bump on a $50,000 salary is $2,500 a year. Compounded over a decade with raises stacked on top, that one uncomfortable conversation is worth tens of thousands of dollars. The discomfort is real. The number is bigger. The fourth is skills. Not skills as a motivational concept. Skills as in the concrete things that command more money on the open market right now. AI literacy, data analysis, cloud fundamentals, cybersecurity basics, project management. Multiple industry studies are showing that workers who can demonstrate real AI proficiency are commanding something like a 20 to 30% premium over peers in similar roles. You don't need a boot camp. LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, and Google's certificate programs exist, and a lot of them are free or nearly free. 30 minutes a day, consistently, is a compounding asset. And the fifth thing, which is the one almost nobody talks about, is geography. Remote work is less available than it was in 2021, but it's not gone. And the ratio of salary to cost of living in a lot of American cities is really, really bad. A $70,000 job in a lower-cost city can leave you with more usable money, more saved, and less stress than a $100,000 job in a high-cost metro where your rent alone is $3,400 a month. It's not the right move for everyone. But if your financial stability is the priority, it's worth doing the actual math instead of defaulting to wherever you ended up after college. And here's the twist. None of this, individually, fixes the system. You doing everything right does not make wage growth catch up to inflation. You negotiating a 5% bump does not unfreeze the entry-level job market. The structural problems are going to get solved at the structural level, or they're not. What the individual moves do is something smaller, and I think more important. They buy you options. They buy you the ability to hold out for a better situation instead of taking the first one that comes along. They buy you the mental space to not check your banking app at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. Because let's be real about what that moment actually is. The midnight check isn't about the number. The number was the number yesterday. The midnight check is about the loss of a future you were told you'd have. You were told that if you went to school, got the degree, took the job, showed up on time, you'd end up with a house and some savings and a retirement account and maybe a kid and a decent vacation once a year. And the 48% number means that for half of your generation, that storyline has officially broken down. And what nobody tells you when that happens is that the grief is real, even though you didn't lose anything tangible. You lost a version of your life that you were planning around. So, if you're the person on the edge of the bed at 11:47 tonight, here's the one thing I want you to take away. You are not failing. The math changed. The inputs you were given, the numbers the previous generation ran, the promises that were baked into going to college or taking the corporate job or being a good employee, those inputs produced different outputs for them than they produce for you. That's not because you did it wrong. It's because the system the math was built on is not the system you're living in. You're not crazy, you're not lazy, you're reading the room correctly. And the fact that 48% of your generation is reading it the same way means it's not a you problem, and it was never going to be solved by one more productivity hack or one more morning routine. Start with the $1,000. Take the match. Ask for more money next time. Build one skill that's worth more than the job you have now. And give yourself a little bit of grace in the meantime, because the system you're navigating is genuinely harder than the one you were told you'd be walking into. If this hits something for you, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I make these because I think most personal finance content is gaslighting you about what's actually going on, and I'd rather just tell you the truth. I'm here every week, same place, same voice. This has been Rocket Finance. I'll see you in the next one.